So, peace, everybody. In the last recording, Pillage, Plunder, Prodigies Part 3, I ended off, I was going into the Europa ideology and how it relates to the men pharaonic lines, and how I've been saying that the Greeks and the Hebrews had a parallel history. They were really the same people, being looked at from a different perspective, and how that there's evidence of the men priest caste being in contact with Israelite women at the very beginning of Israel's history. And in fact, they may have been the matriarchal branch that came out of Egypt. And there's some scriptures in Ezekiel that kind of outline that I'm going to go over. For one, the first one is, it states that, let me see, it says that for she, it's talking about Israel in feminine terms, for she doted upon their paramours, which means lovers, whose flesh is as the flesh of asses, that is a donkey or a mule, and whose issue, which means ejaculation, is like that of horses. Now he's talking about Egyptian men. Thus thou callest to remembrance the lewdness of thy youth, in bruising thy teats by the Egyptians for the paps of thy youth. Now it's Ezekiel chapter 23, verses 20 and 21. Now, if you look in the Hebrew lexicon, where they put the word Egyptians, it means a son, or like S-O-N, a son, who is a founder of a bloodline. So you're thinking like a wealthy, I guess in modern parlance, you would say an eligible bachelor. But when they say whose flesh, the root is basar, the Hebrew word meaning the male member, or the flesh, the flesh in the genital region. So flesh of donkeys, ejaculate of horses is referring to the Egyptians, the sons, the founders of lines, who were being pursued by the Israelite women, not the other way around. So Ezekiel was saying that these Israelite women freely went into Egypt. They weren't slaves. It says right there in Ezekiel, they went into Egypt specifically to pursue these well-endowed Egyptian men who had the ability to found bloodlines, right? It's right there in black and white in the Bible. This is exactly the conditions that I was just speaking about in terms of Europa, and how her marrying Zeus gave her access to the bloodlines, because the whole Zeus metaphor, the whole Zeus Europa myth is a metaphor for an Egyptian royal wedding. I also want to clarify why I feel that Ape is the Egyptian etonym of Europa and Europe. I already went through the points of where in the last recording, how that was an Egyptian word for authority. It was symbolized by a hieroglyphic, a scepter and hieroglyphic. But Ape, I didn't explain what Ape is. Ape is the Egyptian name for Thebes. Thebes was an Egyptian capital under the Thutmoside dynasties, I believe. So Thebes was called Ta'ape. Ta meaning land or district, and Ape is for, it's like another way of saying Ra or Amen. It's the same symbol, sun symbol. Ta'ape. So Ape means that she got her authority, Europa, Ape, she got her authority specifically from Thebes. So this is highly, reasonable because Thebes was the Greek capital as well. So it's not just coincidence that they have the same capital city name. And Europa, who allegedly gave her name to the entire continent, also has that in her appellate name. So there's a big, wide, whole universe of correspondences and syncretisms and everything. It's very interesting to me. So that even in classical Greek times, I think it was Diodorus Siculus, one of the historians, who had trouble. He wondered why Hathor, the love goddess, and Europa seemed to have similar roles, but didn't seem to be related to each other. Now, in the I don't want to call it a cult, but in the system, the spiritual system that involves men and Europa, men has a consort. He is Hathor is said to be one of his consorts, but in Egyptian, she's not Hathor, she's Het Heru. So Het Heru means house. Literally, it means house or temple or abode of Horus. She encloses Horus, or she embraces Horus, right? So she's the companion of men also. But Diodorus, like I said, he suspected that Europa and Aphrodite and Hathor, that they were somehow the same. So he wondered why, from their scripts, they didn't know if Hathor meant, oh no, he didn't know if Aphrodite, they had figured out the etymology to mean her of the either the wide eyes or the broad face, something like that, right? So if you look at the pictures of Heteru or Hathor, she has this wide oval type face, which I guess that kind of went over his head. But if you look at the phonetic spelling of Aphrodite, it could really be parsed Apheruteti. It's phonetically identical. So Apheruteti means the same as Hathor, which is the companion of Horus, or she balances Horus out. So Heru is Horus, and Teti, or Tet, means balance. And the hieroglyphic symbol of it is a stylized, like a spinal column. It has to do with like the chakras and, the significance of the spinal column and like yogic systems and stuff like that. So Aphrodite, to my mind, is a corruption of Apheruteti. So that's why Hathor and Aphrodite are the same. But in terms of the etymology, it kind of went over their heads because they didn't take Heteru to be this balance of Horus. I have to continue in the next part because this is where the memory ends. Peace.